Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Jason Mackey's First 10, a short version podcast talking all things Pittsburgh sports. And today is Friday, August 30th, nearing Labor Day, nearing the start of, the local college football season. Everything else is underway, but that starts this weekend, a week away from Steelers. Pirates restart their season with the series in Cleveland. Well, today is the Q&A Friday episode. Always enjoy these. Do these most times, have a bunch of questions I want to get to. Thank you very much for all of those as usual. So, hey, let's get right into it. After watching all the games, this comes from Tony Parolo. I think Bryan Reynolds is still a good outfielder. Do you think he should change positions? I don't know, and that's a boring answer, so I'm going to give some more context around that. I wouldn't be married to keeping Bryan Reynolds in the outfield. Team build-wise, I do think it's interesting what they do at first base. Probably the outcome or where this lands is that Reynolds stays. And I understand the mark against his defense. I looked this up when Tony asked. -4 defensive runs saved, according to Fangraphs. About 10 worse than that. Reynolds has had some improved throwing, but if you look at defensive metrics, no, they haven't been very good. But with O'Neal Cruz in the outfield, I think I would think about that. You're trying to balance Brian De La Cruz. Who knows what they do with Connor Joe if they bring him back. I would potentially consider it, though. And there's another first base option I want to get to in a minute. Where it hinges, though, Tony, for me, is can he do it? We don't know. Bryce Harper did it well, or good enough. You've seen guys transition to first base, and it doesn't work for others. So I'd maybe consider it. I'd maybe flirt with it. But if it was not good, if it was going to cost the Pirates, because I do think they need to get better defensively, I would not do it. So, all right, John Taylor asks, who is playing first base next year? Endy or any chance they will re-sign Tellez? This is an interesting question, and I don't think it necessarily relates to Rowdy. But what do the Pirates do next season at first base? So they also need, this is oddly tied to their catching situation. Joey Bart's going to be here one way or the other. I can't imagine that they turn him away. But what you do with Joey Bart is going to be interesting. It's also going to be interesting what you do with Henry Davis. And I think they need to collect some information on that from now until the end of the regular season. The question there, oddly, probably isn't whether Henry can hit major league or whether Henry can catch major league pitching. It's whether Henry can hit major league pitching. That's a long way of saying that I think Endy will be a candidate. A dark horse in this, and not that I'm trying to start this podcast off by throwing everybody at first base, is maybe Bart. I think it would be interesting if the Pirates did this, and I wouldn't shock me at all if they decided to try Joey Bart at first base throughout the balance of this season. I think his leg injury is fairly minor. I would expect him to come back at some point, and if he takes some grounders at first base, wouldn't surprise me. That might work. And yet, then you go, some collection of Bart, Endy, Henry, whichever of the two guys shows some progress. I think those could be options, but I don't necessarily see Tellez coming back. I think they're going to want a platoon first. Tellez is probably going to look for regular bats. I'm just not sure I see a match there. Ongo, oh man, this is hard. At Dim Jenkins, Ongo Goblogian. You got me with that one for sure. Where do the Pirates see their shortstop situation in the future with moving Cruz? And does that mean they have a plan to extend him? It does not mean they have a plan to extend him. I don't think that's the way they would go about extending him. Frankly, O'Neal has been so enamored with shortstop. If you wanted to extend him, you might put a clause in the contract that says we're going to play you at shortstop. We guarantee that we're going to play you at shortstop for the next 6 to 8 years. I'm not advocating doing that. I think that would be silly, and I don't want him at shortstop. I'd prefer him at center. But no, that I don't think that begats contract extension whatsoever. Frankly, I have some doubts whether that's going to come together at all. Everything I've heard about the O'Neal Cruz contract talks to this point has not been great. Like they're not singing out of the same hymnal when it comes to what the value might be there. But the future of the shortstop position is an interesting one for me. Tamar Johnson got some time there in Altoona. Wouldn't shock me if he continued to get time there. Just take a look, see what you have. And Isaiah Kinder-Falefa probably now and next season. See where that goes. You can collect information on that. Nick Gonzalez can play there. Jared Triolo can play there. Is that the best thing for the Pirates? I don't know. Probably not. Can debate that. I'm a little surprised they haven't taken a look at Liover Peguero. He's one. So they've got a lot of stuff. I mean, this is way down and it's not immediate, but Connor Griffin is playing there. You would theoretically think that he would get a chance. So Nick York is a middle infielder. I probably wouldn't play him at shortstop once again, but if he plays at second base, does that mean you try to move Nick Gonzalez? I don't know. An obscure one, would playing shortstop take some, is there less turning and I don't know, less stress on Brian Hayes? Would you move him there? I don't know. Probably an extreme case. And again, I'm just thinking out loud, trying to answer the question. Probably wouldn't do it, but yeah, I think there's a fair amount of uncertainty, frankly. And then, I mean, shoot, if Tamar starts hitting and he's really fantastic, maybe he becomes your option there. So there's a lot of places you can go. But as far as the Cruz thing, no, I don't think that means an extension. All right, going to take a short break from me yakking at you with a message per usual from the Bradenton Area Convention and Visitors Bureau, and we'll be back on the other side.
Embrace the laid-back charm of island life while sinking your toes in the sand and discovering real, authentic Florida in the Bradenton area. Unspoiled beauty and pristine beaches, a vibrant waterfront downtown energized by local arts and culture, fresh Floridian cuisine with a flourish of rich history, and friendly locals ready to welcome you to this preserved paradise on Florida's Gulf Coast. Plan your visit today at BradentonGulfIslands.com.
Welcome back to First 10. Want to get to a couple Steelers questions here. El Fusco asks, now that Aiyuk is signed, did the Steelers start the season with the worst wide receiver group in the league? Short answer, no. Want to expand on that a little bit, but the Aiyuk thing, I am so glad it's over, and I am so annoyed that with the friends we made along the way. My goodness, what a stupid, frustrating storyline that we all had to suffer through. I have a Brandon Aiyuk reaction column now in our content management system that was pre-written that's never going to see the light of day. I don't really care, but I'm just annoyed that I spent the time doing it. Certainly seemed like that was far enough along, but whatever. The storyline is dead. He's re-signing in San Francisco. Good for you, Brandon Aiyuk. Thank you for all the attention that you plucked away from us along the way. I had another question too, to get back to the Steelers receivers situation here. Nick at ROTY Rookie of the Year, Nick asks, who do you think is a realistic option at wide receiver now that the Aiyuk saga is over, or do they not sign one? If they do something, I mean, there are some options out there. I've seen like Ladarius Toney, Allen Robinson III, Michael Thomas. I don't know if I'm enamored with any of those guys. I mean, they really feel like signing someone just for the sake of signing them, or a serious Hail Mary, and not in a good sense of the word. I don't think the Steelers have the worst wide receiver room in the league. I do think there's upside with George Pickens. I've been largely impressed with Van Jefferson this preseason. I think there's some other fill-in options. If they can get Roman Wilson healthy, I think that would really help them. I think if you look at Arthur Smith's offenses, and this is why I think, maybe you add somebody. I know they've been inquiring on like John Mechie from the Texans. He would make sense to me. Like, that's a way to make your room better, depending on what the ask was. If the Texans were willing to do that, like that, I could see that. But, Allen Robinson III, they had that. Didn't really do anything. And so I look at previous offenses that Arthur Smith had, Tennessee, Atlanta, in that tight end spot where the Steelers could theoretically be decently deep. That might function as another wide receiver. Like, I think you're going to see Pat Freiermuth get the ball a lot, as you should. And if you look at those other Arthur Smith offenses too, it's been really top heavy with the receivers. Like, you have one primary guy, it can be George Pickens, and then you kind of fill in the cracks around it. So maybe that becomes a little Van Jefferson. Maybe that becomes a little Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller. I don't know. Quez Watkins, Calvin Austin III. So I start thinking about those comps, and I'm not as down on the wide receivers room as maybe I was originally. I don't think it's the worst in the league, and I have some questions on whether they would, whether they would indeed add. So, okay, let's get to a couple more here. I don't want to go too far over. How much longer does Shelton have? Good question. Fuller at DF Photos 4 asks that one. This is, we haven't heard anything now, so I'm going to assume that he's going to manage the series against the Guardians. And at this point, if the other day wasn't enough to do it in season, I think we're probably looking at an off-season evaluation. So, what's there left? 29 games, 28 games, whatever. And if the Pirates go from 76 wins to below that, and then absolutely limping into the clubhouse with a terrible second half. I don't know how you stick with that. I just don't. I mean, the Pirates are not in a spot where they should be based on their stated goals or whatever. That's not personal. That's a clearly objective opinion. It's not good enough. It hasn't been good enough. And a downward slide would clearly not be good enough. So at that point, I think you go in a different direction. And frankly, I'm a little surprised that they haven't gone in a different direction to this point. I think there's some valuable time you could use over the balance of this season. If you wanted to fire Shelton, take a look at Don Kelly, see what's there. And then you have maybe a little clearer picture of your management position this offseason. Maybe Don Kelly's the guy. I don't know. Maybe you go outside the organization. Maybe you get a sense without Shelton, hey, what was lacking? What do we need? What direction do we go? So again, a little surprised by that because the other day was as rock bottom as I've seen, as I've written. And there aren't really any answers. It's like stick together as a team. To me, that was like, we know the torrential downpour is going to continue. The best thing we can do is just like huddle up in the corner. I know that's not what they're saying, but it just does not seem like there are any answers here. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. Really, really concerning stuff from the Pirates. So we'll see what happens in Cleveland. Me saying all that means they're probably going to sweep the Guardians or something and look like world beaters, because doesn't that always happen? And if they do, well, we'll talk about it right here. Make sure you like and subscribe. You can get all of these videos. I'll be back here on Monday. Hope you enjoy the weekend. I'm heading down to West Virginia. Can't wait. Going to be a lot of fun. There will be reaction to that and so much more around college football. Be back next week to talk to you all about it. Thanks for watching First 10.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.